Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today we'll be continuing our new series where we focus around the possible mortal units for each respective Chaos God. Yesterday we spoke about the possible units devoted to Slaanesh, an army based around fast moving units with mostly skirmishing and flanking forces. But today we'll look towards something more frontline combat specific, where our focus is shifting towards the blood god Khorne. As before, there weren't many god specific units added in for the blood god, same as all the other chaos gods, and the grand majority of all Khorne specific units were added in through the End Times and Age of Sigmar. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in. The first unit we'll be talking about are that of the Blood Reavers, a basic type of troop choice which more or less gets rid of the need of marauders, as they would function in a very similar way. As you can see, the Blood Reavers themselves are armed in a very similar way to that of the marauders. Additional hand weapons and great weapons are their weapons of choice, and it's very much what you will expect for the rest of this roster. Fundamentally, they would act exactly the same way as that of marauders, but it can be assumed that since they are followers of Khorne and mutations are obviously already taking effect, that they would be a tad more durable. Next we have the Blood Warriors, which as expected would replace the need of basic Chaos Warriors, and there are two variants here. That of 2 axes and one with an axe and a fist weapon. It's important to note that the fist weapon, known in Age of Sigmar as a Gore Fist, could also act as a shield. We actually had this type of weaponry in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but more specifically with the ogres. Of course, there's also that one warrior with a rather interesting looking great weapon, which could also come into effect, meaning that instead we would have the possibility at 3 different variants. Again, they would have more or less the same functionality as that of Chaos Warriors, but they are Khorne specific, they look the part, and they're not basic reskins. Plus, let's be honest, they do look rather cool. Imagine having an army of these charging directly in front of your enemy lines. There's not much to talk about this next unit, the Skull Crushers of Khorne, mainly because we've already seen them on the trailer, but the main reason I want to show these models off is just so you can see how the End Times and Age of Sigmar models still keep true to the whole Khorne aesthetic. Moving on, we have the Wrathmongers. Powerful flail-wielding units. Their role on the battlefield is to just charge in and do as much damage as possible, not caring about their own lives. They are pretty much that blender type of unit that most armies tend to look for. They wouldn't be that large in number, but they would be extremely durable, as they would mostly ignore pain. I'd even go as far as saying as they could possibly also be unbreakable. Of course, this would be a high tier unit, and you wouldn't be able to recruit them that early on into your campaign, but as soon as you do, I imagine that they would be a very popular favourite among Khorne players. And lastly we have the Skull Reapers, another interesting unit that would likely be the replacement for that of the Undivided Chosen. We see them here carrying a multitude of weapons, so it's likely that we might see 2 different variants. One with great weapons, and another variant dual-wielding some hand weapons. They'd very much fill out the role of the Chosen as explained before, though it could be possible they'll take more of a role of Chaos Warriors. It very much depends on how Creative Assembly would want to go around them. But they are quite cool looking, and that's the most important thing. It's important to remember that with these monogod factions, visual representation is itself quite important. If taking into account the units already mentioned and their possible variants, then we already have a pretty decently sized army for the armies of Khorne. However, we're still to discuss the possible lords and heroes, and we're going to discuss that right now as there are some very interesting choices. The Aspiring Deathbringer comes into mind as a possible hero choice. And yes, it is very much the same as the current melee hero choice for the Warriors of Chaos, but once again with a different reskin. Its functionality will be very much the same. There doesn't really need to be any changes, especially as most melee heroes seem to do the same thing anyway, regardless of race or faction. Another possible melee hero would be that of the Skull Grinder. I would see this one more focused towards giving some buffs to some units, like for example the Wrathmongers and the Skull Reapers. It is expected, with regards to Khorne at the very least of course, that we would see a rather large variety of different melee lords and heroes. You have to remember that Khorne does not use magic, and because of that, his forces would also not use magic either. It just makes sense. Why would they go about doing something that their god despises? Now we would move on to the lord choices, with our first one being an Exalted Deathbringer, which for all intents and purposes is a Chaos Lord of Khorne. Once again, melee variant, we already know what this is, so there's not too much to talk about. We have seen different variants of the Exalted Deathbringer, for example this one on screen right now, which is more demonic than human. It could be assumed that to fill out the ranks of the roster a little bit, then we might see a few different variants being implemented. This more demonic one is one that has received a bunch of boons from the Blood God himself. Because of this, he is neither man nor demon, but a very thin line in between both. This is something that was never really too explored in Warhammer Fantasy lore, so its appearance here would actually be quite interesting. With all that being said, there would be a bunch of possible different Exalted Deathbringers, but at the end of the day, all that really changes them up is their weapon choice. While yes, the weapons do have different effects on the battlefield, ultimately everything is very much the same. There was one type of character that was added into Age of Sigmar, however, which could be either a possible lord or even a hero choice. I'm of course referring to the Slaughter Priest. As I had explained before, of course Khorne uses no magic, which was a bit of a clutch on the tabletop. Of course, that didn't mean too much when back then most of the demons and Warriors of Chaos were undivided, but in a monogod faction, well, you're losing out on a very powerful tool. In Age of Sigmar, however, things were changed up a little bit just to make sure that there was some balance for the forces of Khorne. This was of course with the introduction of the Slaughter Priest. So the Slaughter Priests themselves are a buffing unit, very similar to that of a dwarf rune lord. In fact, should this type of character ever be implemented into Total War Warhammer, I'm imagining that it would work exactly the same way as a rune lord, where you would be able to focus around buffing your troops rather than casting spells. I understand that obviously this doesn't pair to, well, a Lore of Shadows or a Lore of Death spellcaster, however, it does help and brings a little bit of balance in. It could be possible that we would see a Lord and a Hero variant, a basic Slaughter Priest as a hero and an Exalted Slaughter Priest as a Lord. And honestly, that's pretty much everything in terms of god-specific mortals for Khorne. Khorne's faction lacks range and magic, and it can be a bit of a clutch. However, you have the benefit of very strong heavy cavalry and a front line of very vicious units. Also, if the mortal units are mixed up with the demon units, then you're gonna also find yourself with some artillery at the very least, considering that if my recollection is correct, Khorne's forces are the only monogod ones that actually have artillery, so at least you have that to help you. I'm assuming that a large variety of these Khorne-specific units would either be unbreakable or have extremely large leadership, so they will at least be less likely to break. Without having any magic or range, you're going to have to need warriors that can stay on the battlefield and can take a lot of punishment. Obviously, this is what the Blood God is known for, and there are no cowards who worship Khorne, so I'd only see the most direst of circumstances where they would actually break. The forces of Khorne might be a hard faction to play, especially once you start dealing with enemy doomstacks of Sisters of Avalon. Though I'm imagining that Creative Assembly have some stuff planned to make sure that, well, they don't get wiped out before they actually do some damage. But what do you guys think about these possible mortal Khornate demons for a possible mono-god faction for the Blood God Khorne? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.